So, right now, a huge U.S. naval deployment is heading straight for the coast of Iran, led by what some people are calling the most powerful warship ever built. But here's the thing. The source material we're looking at for this explainer says this huge show of force, it's all just a distraction. So, what's really going on? Let's break it down.
Yeah, this is the big question, right? You've got these super high-stakes diplomatic talks happening, but at the exact same time, this unbelievably powerful fleet is just racing towards the Persian Gulf. So what gives? Are these things connected, or is one just a big smokescreen for the other? To really get a grip on what's at stake here, you have to understand the sheer scale of this thing. 100 million kilograms. That's how much the lead ship weighs, the aircraft carrier USS Gerald R. Ford. I mean, this isn't just a ship. It's a floating city, a floating fortress. It's basically American power made physical and sent across the globe. And get this, the Ford isn't sailing alone, not even close. It's leading a carrier strike group, and it's joined by another carrier, the Abraham Lincoln. So what does that mean? Well, you're talking 2 nuclear reactors powering these behemoths, more than 75 aircraft ready to go, over 4,500 crew members, and a constant stream of supplies and weapons. The source even says 50 fighter jets were deployed in just one 24-hour period. That is not a subtle move. That's a clear signal that they mean business. Okay, so you've got this massive naval force, right? But here's where the story takes a turn. According to the source we're digging into, this whole display of military might, it's just the stage. The real battle, it says, isn't being fought at sea. At least, not yet. It's happening in the shadows. All right, so what about those diplomatic talks happening over in Geneva? You know, the ones that are supposed to be about peace? Well, our source makes a pretty bold claim here. It says they're not really about peace at all. They're a form of spying before an attack, a way to gather mission-critical intel under the perfect cover of diplomacy. And it's not just a vague idea. The source actually lays out a specific playbook for how this intelligence gathering works. Step 1, use the talks to figure out Iran's real red lines, not just the stuff they say in public. Step 2, map out their power structure. Who's actually calling the shots? Step 3, find the cracks. Exploit any divisions you can find inside the Iranian leadership. And finally, step 4, confirm which sanctions are really hurting them so you know exactly where to apply more pressure later on. And if you think that sounds cynical, check out this direct quote from the source material. So the members of the military dialogues are all spies. Wow. I mean, it doesn't get much clearer than that. The argument is that these negotiators aren't diplomats. They're intelligence assets sent to poke and prod for weaknesses right before a fight. It completely reframes the whole situation, doesn't it? So this just brings up a huge question, right? If the military buildup is for show, and the diplomacy is just a cover for spying, then what is the actual goal here? What's the real prize in this region that would justify this level of high-stakes maneuvering? Well, the answer, like it so often is in this part of the world, comes down to geography. We're talking about the Strait of Hormuz. At its narrowest point, it's just 33 kilometers wide. 33 kilometers. And yet, a huge chunk of the world's entire energy supply has to squeeze through that tiny gap. It is one of the most critical economic choke points on the planet. If you can control it, you hold some serious power. And this chart really puts it into perspective. Look at that. Roughly a quarter, 25% of all the world's oil and gas transport passes right through there. The ability to control or even just threaten that waterway gives any nation a massive lever over the entire global economy. And to make that number even more real, think about it this way. Every single day, about 20 million barrels of oil flow through the Strait of Hormuz. Any disruption, even for a short time, would send absolute shockwaves through the global economy, and it would especially hammer major Asian economies like China, India, and Japan, who depend on that flow. But here's the really surprising argument from our source. It claims that if Iran actually did manage to shut down the strait, the country that would be hurt the most wouldn't be the United States. No, the real economic disaster would land squarely on Asia, on China, India, and Japan, who are completely dependent on those shipments. So why is that? Why wouldn't the U.S. be hit the hardest? Well, this chart here tells the story. The U.S. has become the world's largest oil producer. It's pumping out almost 14 million barrels a day on its own. Now sure, a shutdown of Hormuz would cause gas prices to spike everywhere, but in terms of its own energy needs, the U.S. is just far less vulnerable than it used to be. And that gives it a huge strategic advantage in this standoff. So this all leads to a super tense situation where both sides are basically gaming out the worst case scenario. And our source lays out what it calls two nightmare scenarios, the absolute ultimate failure that each side is desperate to avoid. And here they are, side by side. For the US and Israel, the ultimate nightmare is having an aircraft carrier sunk. It would be a profound global military humiliation, a symbol that their tech superiority isn't invincible. Now, for Iran, the nightmare is completely different. Their ultimate fear is successful regime change. The government being overthrown, a puppet government being installed, and the country falling into a permanent state of civil war. These are the catastrophic outcomes that are driving every single move they make. Okay, so how on earth could Iran even think about taking on the might of the U.S. Navy? Well, the source details what's called an asymmetric strategy. It's not about matching their tech, it's about overwhelming it. The plan would be to launch waves of cheap drones and basically empty, hollow missiles just to make the American fleet waste all its expensive interceptors. Then, while that chaos is happening, you swarm the carriers with thousands of tiny speedboats to distract and confuse them, all to create an opening to land one single, devastating missile strike. And according to the source, this isn't just some abstract war game. It claims that final preparations for a major conflict are actually underway right now. We're talking about bunkers being opened in Israel, underground hospitals being set up, key military assets are being moved into position as we speak. And on top of that, there's a lot of domestic pressure to act. A survey from an Israeli TV channel, which our source cites, found that nearly 60% of the public supports an attack on Iran. When you have that level of public support, it creates a political environment that makes military action much, much more likely. This is a really important point. The source argues that anyone expecting some kind of quick, clean, surgical strike is totally mistaken. Given the scale of preparations and just how high the stakes are for everyone involved, any conflict would almost certainly be a long, drawn-out war. We're talking weeks, maybe even months, with completely devastating and unpredictable consequences. So that begs the question, why now? Why is all this happening right now? The source points to a piece of ancient military logic, a kind of strategic justification. The belief is that the enemy, in this case Iran, is currently weak, and to wait to give it time to rearm and get stronger would be a war folly, a huge mistake. And this all brings us to a final, really crucial question for our time. In a world of these kinds of asymmetric threats, where one side has overwhelming conventional power and the other relies on creating chaos, what does victory even look like anymore? If an aircraft carrier isn't sunk, but the entire global economy is crippled, who won? If a regime isn't toppled, but its country is left in ruins for a generation, is that a victory? In this modern world of complex, messy conflicts, what does winning truly mean?